This video will show how to add finely sculpted details to a low density mesh using a normal map. This is part of a series that goes through all the steps it takes to make a character in Blender. If you haven't seen the previous videos, as long as you have a UV'd low density mesh, you'll have all you need to follow along. Here's an example of a character that has a normal map similar to the one that we'll make in this tutorial. And you can see, for example, on the lips here, there's lots of wrinkles on it. But if you look at the actual geometry, it's actually a very simple geometry. And over here, you can see this is the actual normal map. And you can see the wrinkles on this normal map here. And that's how we get the textures or the shapes on these lips here. We create the normal map with two meshes. A low density mesh, like you see on the left here, that you use for your animations or your project, and a high density mesh using a multi-res modifier, which you do all your fine detail and sculpting work. And then we do a process called baking, where we bake the detail of the high res mesh onto the low detail mesh. The way we're doing this tutorial is a little bit backwards, because we're starting off with a low detail mesh and then creating a high detail sculpt. Normally, you'd create a high detail sculpt first and then create the low detail mesh afterwards. Either way, once you've got the two meshes, a low detail and a high detail, the process of baking the normals is the same thing. Okay, let's sculpt some details. Okay, let's go to our sculpting workspace. If you mouse over the outliner and hit minus, it closes the collections. If you hit plus, it opens them. So let's hide that, open our character here, grab the body, go to edit mode, drag some and zoom in. And we just want to get the parts we want to sculpt. And we are only going to put detail on the face. If you want to put detail in more places, you're welcome to, but this tutorial just covers the face. So let's grab the eye sockets, grab the mouth, just in case we need that. Hit Shift D, escape, mesh, separate, selection. Okay, go out of edit mode, grab we can hide that, grab the body and hit H to hide it. Let's leave X-ray, and there we go. We have the mesh that we're going to do the high detail on. Let's go to the modifiers tab and let's delete our sub D and go and add a multi-resolution. So it's right here. And depending on your system, if you have a weak system, you won't be able to subdivide this many times. If you can swing it, get this up to about 7. 6 is probably okay, but 7 is better. You can see my computer's cranking as it thinks about this. And one more time. So we've got that set up. And if you go to sculpt mode, you can see it's very high detail. I don't like the view so wide angle, so let's make this 200. And I think we are ready to sculpt. Let's go to X-ray and go to Tool. Let's actually move this over here. We can use this texture from where we're doing the colors. Let's put this to stencil. Let's put this sample bias to -0.7. Set this to 0.1. Let's go to the front view here and zoom in on the lips. Let's drag this here and it's stretched. So let's reset the image aspect. Oops, reset transform, image aspect. Turn off. Whenever I undo, things kind of revert. So, okay, here we go. I think that looks pretty good to start with. let's take a minute to explain this sample bias here. So the effect we're trying to go for is the dark parts of this texture. We want that to push inwards, and the rest we want to stay the same. So that way the shape of the lips overall stays the same. It's just we put in some detail. So let me show you what that looks like here. So if you leave us at 0 and we brush over here, we can see it pops outwards, and we don't want that. Okay. If we set this to -1 and do the same thing, you can see the whole thing pushes inwards. We don't want that. I've messed with this, so I know that -0.7 is just about right. So if we brush that, you can see more or less it stays pretty flush. It sinks in a bit, but it's pretty flush. And this is overly exaggerated because I have it set to strength 1. So when you want to do this, it's Control-Z this a few times. Here, here, and here. When you have your own textures, just mess with the sample bias so that way it stays pretty flat. Also, I thought it would do it, but it didn't do it. Sometimes this texture gets really hard to see, like it gets really faint or really dark. I don't know why that happens, but the only way I've found to fix that is you just go to brushes, delete that brush, hit a new brush, and re-grab your texture, and you have to basically reset everything, and then it goes back to where you can see it nicely. So, okay, so let's go back to our front view here. We will reset the image aspect like that, and let's scale it down a bit here. Actually, let's zoom in here and scale that up and get this lined up just the way we want it. And then let's make this 0.1, get our bias back to -0.7. And then let's make this a bit bigger, and we can just, oh yeah, you see here how we lost our, for some reason it changed and it's hard to see. So I don't know why that happens, but we just delete that. Oops. New tiled stencil. It's so weird. Okay, 0.1 and -0.7. Okay, I don't know why that's happening. Okay, here we are. So let's brush this in. So if we just brush that in with our mouse, this is probably better with a stylus. You can see we're getting some texturing. And so this is the artistic part. You just brush it in until you are happy with the effect. If you're using a mouse, set this to 0.1 so you can easily just sneak up on how much texture you want to add. Put a little bit around the edges. Maybe more here. Maybe more in the middle. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let's see what we got here. Let's drag that aside. Normally textures don't line up perfectly like that, but you can always go in and add some more texture. So you can just drag that to where you want it, or you can rotate it and add a bit more as you please. You can like rotate and scale and mess with whatever texture map you're using to get your texture to be just the way you want it. Okay, let's add some more texture here. So we will copy this and call this A-skin. Blow that away, click open, and find the texture I made for this tutorial. I'll give this to you guys also. Let's set this to actually random and make the sample bias -0.8. 0.8. I've already tested it, and make this 0.1. And for when you set to random, it just randomly throws this texture down everywhere. If you make the spacing less, let's say 0.2%, it'll make that these textures closer together. The largest number it is, the further apart they are. And then let's see here. So if you hit F, you can make this texture the scale you want to be. So I think that's pretty good. But you should also set brush to scene. Okay, so you can see the size of this texture and the size of the red dot, red circle. If you set the brush to scene, right there, when you scale out, the size of the red circle gets smaller also. So this way, whatever zoom level you're in, that texture is always the same size in relation to the face. If this is set to view, when you scale out like this, you can see the size of the texture is gigantic. And so that it wouldn't look good. So choose the size you want, go to brush and scene. Okay, 0.1, negative 0.8. I'm going to turn on mirror, so you only have to do one side. And let's hide these eyelashes so we can see better. So just really lightly, I mean, this is a pretty stylized character, so I'm just really lightly putting some indication of texture, so there's a bit more depth. Like that, and I don't even know if you can see it in the video, but there's a very faint texture there. If you were making a very realistic character, each zone of the face would have a different type of texture map, because the skin changes all over the face and all over the body. For this, it's a pretty stylized, simple character, so I'm just going to use this one texture for the whole face. When you add subsurface scattering and color to it, it's really hard to see. But sometimes you'll catch it with a shadow. And you can see my computer just lagged there because it's the multi-resolution is pretty high, so it's hard for my computer to handle this. I'm steering clear of the edge of this mesh here, because if you go too close to it, you'll see an abrupt change from textured to non-textured. If you want to texture the back of the head, you can grab that too. And let's add a bit of texture here. Okay, maybe we can add a little more, like larger pores here, just a little bit. You also want to be careful around the eyelids, because when they close, it'll stretch all these textures. So I'm actually not putting any textures there. If that's important to you, what you can do is model your character with the eyes closed or partially closed, and then texture it that way, and then animate it opened. So this way you get more resolution. But for me, it doesn't bother me, so I'm doing it like this. So yeah, so I think that's pretty good. I think I'm happy with that. Okay, let's go to our shader workspace. So when we bake the normals, we want to have our high res mesh, the low res mesh, and we want to create a new texture that's inside our low res mesh. When we bake the normals from the high res mesh onto the low res mesh, we actually record it in that new texture we're going to create that's inside the low res mesh. So let's go and create that. Let's make a little more space here, and let's get this file set up to bake. So we only want things active that we want in our bake. So let's turn everything off we don't want. This little eye means it's not visible, but it would still render. So you can delete that or move it somewhere. I'll put it in templates. And let's check here. These eyelashes will get in the way because they're active. So let's turn that off. And oops, we've got, this is our high res mesh. Let's name that high res sculpt. And let's call this, which is our body, the low res mesh. Okay, so we got those two here. Let's also, just so we don't confuse ourselves, let's take off the material from the high res. So turn that, hit that minus, and it'll delete this material. Okay, let's move this over a bit here, and we'll add our textures so we can bake our normals onto it. So Shift A, S, I, M, A for image texture, click that there. We will Shift duplicate this. So we'll make one lower resolution so we can test it, and one high resolution so we can do it for real, because baking is finicky and it takes a few tries to get it to work. So click new, call this AUT, oops, AUT dash normal 1. We'll make this say 4K to match our other textures. 4096. That's kind of overkill. Okay, and then we will make a new one here, AUT dash normal test, and we'll make this 1537 by 1537. It's kind of high, but the face is so small in this map, I want to be able to at least see what we're testing. Make this blue. Okay, so we've got those two here. Let's make sure our bake settings are proper. So cycles, so set this to cycles. Feature set supported is fine. GPU, if you have a good GPU, turn it on. If you don't, you can use a CPU. Let's lower this. This render settings here, the samples, is how high quality it is. So let's lower this to 64 for our test. We'll make it higher when we do our actual bake. You can use denoising. I'm not sure if this works for bakes, for normals, but you can have that turned on. If you have a GPU, OpticX is good. If you don't, you can use OpenImage for CPU. And bake, set this to normals. There we go. Selected to active here. And so basically, when you do your baking, you're kind of like messing with this extrusion number here and just playing with that. And it takes a few tries to get the perfect setting. What I'm going to do is show you bad first, so you can understand what bad and good looks like, and then we'll do a good one. And then let's see here. Oh, I forgot also. So let's start with our test. So this is the autumn normal test. So let's make it visible here. And autumn normal test. Okay, so at least we can kind of preview and see what's going on for our test render. So this is how baking works. You click your high-res mesh. You shift-click your low-res mesh. You select the texture you want to bake your normals onto. Make sure it's visible here, which it is. Make sure the normal is selected here and selected to active. And then you want to have this set to the proper number. This is the improper number. Let's test it and see what it looks like. Okay, so let's take a look here. So if you see, so for your normal map, everything wants to be kind of purpley. All this yellow and green and, you know, bright fuchsia and dark purple, that's all bad. We don't want that. If you look closely, this is part of the lip here. You see how it's pinks and purples, light purples and light blues? That's all good. So we want the whole thing to be as much as possible like that. So this is clearly not okay. So normally I'd mess with this until I get something that looks good. Let's try 0.5, which I think worked pretty good. Okay, so let's see here now. Okay, so we've got lots of the wrinkles for the lips. Look like they're all correct. This here, this is like inside the lips and inside the mouth a bit. So you get this kind of thing going on when there's a cavity or something like that. For this bake, it's okay. We are going to just erase that in Blender. Usually I use Photoshop to delete these or erase these kinds of things, but let's try and stick to Blender only for this tutorial, so as much as possible. So let's just use Blender to do that. But let me see here if everything else looks good. Yeah, these textures are so faint. It's okay. And so all this other stuff all over here, we're just going to blow all of that away. But we'll keep some of these faint texture details around the face and the lips. Okay, so let's do our actual bake. So we will grab our real texture here. We'll make it visible down here, Autumn Normal 01. Okay, this is our 4K texture here. That's clicked on here. So click our mesh, click our high res mesh, shift click the low res mesh, select the texture we want to bake our normal onto, make it visible here so you can see it, and then we've got 0.5 set and click bake. Okay, let's check out our normal map here. So we'll see. Yep, we've got faint textures. Hopefully you can see that in the video. Like here on the cheek, there's some faint textures. Let's make this bigger. Yep. Wrinkles for the lips, that's good. These here will, it's just because they're cavities, we'll get rid of all those. So let's first save our image. When we've got the star, it means it's not saved. So let's go to Image and Save As. And it's Autumn Normal 01, save. Okay, so we've got that saved. Next, we'll resize the image. So go to the image editing program of your choice. I'm using Photoshop. Open up our new normal map. And let me explain why we're doing this. So when you create normals in Blender, there's it doesn't smooth things out. There's no anti-aliasing. So this is a hack to get anti-aliasing. So you can see here, these it's pretty rough, especially these wrinkles. And so we will go to Image and Image Size and change this to a 4K. And click OK. And then when it updates, you can when it updates, you can see now this has smoothed out nicely. So then go to File and Save. Then let's jump back into Blender. Back in Blender, let's just make sure we reload our texture. So we'll go to get rid of that and go to Open and navigate to where we have the textures saved, which is in the Textures folder, can't see here, and Autumn Normal. Now let's go and edit that image. So we'll go to our Texture Paint workspace, drag that over, and drag this over. Yeah, let's just start messing with this. You know, I forgot. Let's take a look and see. Actually, let's plug in our normal map and see what it looks like. So let's go to our shading workspace and drag this down here. We don't need this test anymore, so let's delete that. We'll drag our texture over here. And let's also make sure you save your file so you have this high detail sculpt if you need to make again. I'm going to delete it, so it's bogging down my system. Let's turn on the lights here so we can see what's going on. And again, grab our mesh. Let's plug these things in. So this goes to non-color. Drag this color node to normal. You can see it looks really strange. We don't want that. Then go to Shift A, S, N, O, R for normal map. And just drag this onto the white line. And it's plugged in the way it should be. Let's take a look and see here. Yeah, there's texture here. It's hard to see, so let's pull off our albedo. Okay, so you can see we've got some textures on the lips. We've got some, I can barely see textures on the cheeks here. So we're good, but you can see anywhere we had those surfaces or cavities too close together, you can see you have these weird shadows or watermarks. So we need to get rid of all of that stuff here. So, you could have actually rendered this at a higher resolution, but 4K is pretty high, so I don't think we want to go any higher than that. But it's a little bit rough, but people won't really be looking this close. It'll be more, like maybe here, and it looks fine from this distance. Okay, it's a weird color brown. Okay, so let's go and get rid of all these little imperfections in our normal map. So let's grab this and drag it over here and drag that over there. We will make this one smaller and set this to image editor and set this from view to paint and hit T to bring up our tools palette. So we can paint it. We can edit things here and fix it. We can also edit things here. So we set this to texture paint and hit T for tools. You can see we can edit the normal map in the actual 3D viewport too. So let's show you both of those ways of doing things. So let's zoom in here and okay, you can see this funny little watermark there. We want to get rid of that. So if we reduce this down and go to the smudge tool, we can hit N to get our tools palette and set the strength from 1 to all the way down. I'm just going to leave it at 1. And I'm going to just smudge this around until I don't see it in the 3D viewport. But you want to be careful not to mess up the good parts of your normal map. So this part here is good. Sorry, this part here is good. This pink part is bad. So we want to make sure you don't mess with the pink part. But I want to show you. So let's see here. So let's mess with this little yellow part. Okay. So if you go and smudge it down, you can see it fixes, it makes a little tiny fixed part in the 3D viewport. So if you go and just drag all this in, you can see it starts to move all that bad area in towards the middle of her mouth. Okay, so you can do that. You can also brush it. So if you hit the brush tool and find a nice neutral color somewhere, so maybe here is good, hit S to pick it up. And then you can, I think my brush is set too weak, so let's go to the brush settings here. And strength, yeah, is too low, so I'm going to put that all the way up. Okay, S to grab a color, and then you can just draw that all and just get rid of it. So use smudge or use painting, whatever you like, whatever works for you. I'm not worried about this too much because it's inside the mouth. If you say like some of these wrinkles and you want to pull them in further, you could do that with the smudge tool. So if you hit, and if for that I might lower this strength to like 0.5. So if you want to say pull this wrinkle further in, you could do that by just clicking that and dragging it. And it is so faint it's not really doing a lot. It's doing a little bit. I think if it was dark it'd work better. But either way, you don't see it too much. It's not a huge deal. Let's put this back to 1. Just drag it all in. If you wanted to, you could also do it in the 3D viewport. So if you hit N to go to Tool, make sure you have the correct texture selected. So this would be the color that we don't want to mess with. This is the normal map. Same one over here. So make sure that's selected. And then you can, smudge tool, you can smudge that here also. Let's see here. If you didn't catch that, I just went to edit mode and grabbed a face I wanted to look at, and then I zoomed in and popped out of edit mode. It's a nice way to, just snap your view. So like say let's go fix inside the nostril. You can go to edit mode, drag there, select it, zoom in, go back into texture paint. And then with the smudge tool on, you can, paint in your 3D viewport and just get rid of all that stuff here. Since you can maybe see in the nose, I'm going to paint instead. And it's a little bit hard because you can't see the actual texture. You can just see the result. So if you're brave, you can just pick an area where you think the texture is pretty good and hit S to pick it up and just paint stuff away. If you want to be careful a bit, you can go over here and say hit S here. So you know the color is a nice neutral color, and then go back and paint it all away. So it's, you can just flip back and forth and find the easiest way for you to just go through all this. I'd probably just go big and just get rid of all that. Maybe that was too big. Just get rid of all this stuff here too. Oh, when you see the star, it means it's not saved. So let's make sure we save this. So I'm going to go through all of the face and delete and get rid of all these little details. But, also for the rest of this mesh, like everything else, we don't need any of this. So just get your brush on here, hit S to grab it. Let's make sure we set the strength 1. Erase all of that, or paint over all of that so it's that generic purple color. At the edges of this, the face, that was the high resolution sculpt that we made. For all of that, just draw along the edges so it's just the pure purple color. Just get rid of all of this stuff. We don't need any of it. Oh, it's slow. When you zoom out too far, it's slow. So stay a little bit zoomed in. It's because you're just trying to manipulate too many pixels. 4K is pretty high. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'm just going to go here and let's get rid of some of this stuff here, so just smudge it away. And to get rid of these, this is probably the worst area. We don't want to mess up the good parts of the map. Again, this is probably a lot easier with a stylus. One day I'll get a stylus. Okay, so I think that's about it. Just gonna check to make sure everything looks okay. I think that's actually a little bit funny. Make sure I'm on brush here. Let's grab S to grab a color. Just, where is that? Fingers? Oh, yeah, I totally missed all this. Let's not make it so big that it bogs down my work. Oops. Did I just wipe over the face? I think I still have texture there. The subsurface scattering makes it harder to see. You can turn it off. You can see the textures more cleanly. Okay, I've still got textures. I think that's good now. Subsurface back on. Oops, 0.01. And let's put our color back on. And let's save our image. Save. Okay, let's turn everything back on so we can get a feel for what the character looks like with a normal map on. So we'll turn on the eyelashes, turn on the hair, get that out of the way. Let's go to object mode. So it's pretty subtle right now, it's hard to see, and that's because the lips are completely matte. We're going to actually later make a roughness map to make the lips glossy, and so something like this. And so you can see once the lips get glossy and the skin, the cheek here, once it gets glossy, you can see the bumps more. When the roughness is really low, it's harder to see it. So don't worry, the normal map is actually doing something. and we'll be able to see it more once we finish our whole character. That's it for our video today. I hope you found it useful. If it was, leave a comment to let me know, subscribe, or better yet, support me on Patreon. And in the next video, we will finish the skin by creating a roughness map and a subsurface scattering map. Thanks for watching.